Tonight, I'm speaking with Dyrk Ashton, author of the Paternus Trilogy. Hi, Dyrk.
Hello.
Uh, are you
Welcome.
secretly are you
Thank you.
secretly English, Dyrk?
I couldn't help myself. I
That's
actually
fair
say
enough.
that I actually say that a lot here when I
You can't
run
help
into
yourself.
people. I'll say hello.
Hmm.
Can't help it.
You say it like hello, hello.
No, I do the Americanized redneck version. Hello. Hello.
All right. Well, I think you'll probably have a really good kickoff. I usually ask everyone to introduce themselves with a random fact about themselves.
Oh, a random fact about
Yeah.
me. Um uh you caught me. I like peanut butter, Miracle Whip, and lettuce sandwiches.
Okay. That is random, and I'm sure people in the
And
audience.
many people would say disgusting.
Yes. Well, I think my main character, Holt, who is a cook, would disapprove of this greatly. I don't think he'd
Well, you don't
support
cook
this
it.
sandwich.
You
You
don't
don't.
cook it.
Well, yeah, but you still make it. I mean, you cook a salad, right? You just cook it together. But so, want to tell us a little bit about for the people out there who may not have heard of you, Dirk, a bit about Paternus and what the series is about.
It's this stuff right here. Ugh. Paternus Rise of Gods, Paternus Wrath of Gods, and Paternus War of Gods, books 1, 2, and 3. So it's a trilogy. I like how I figured that out. Um, it's people call it epic urban fantasy. Based mostly the many of the characters are drawn from mythologies from all over the world. And basically, I've put together some sort of nonsensical unified field theory for where all the gods and legends came from all over the world. And it's one big unhappy family who are getting ready to fight yet another battle in the world's oldest war. So it takes place today in this world, and some young, normal people get caught up in this incredibly large, epic conflict,
Cool.
basically. I'm terrible at elevator pitches. Terrible.
No, I mean some elevator rides do last a while, so it depends how long the elevator is.
That's right.
That would have been fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so do you think I know you've got this trilogy, do you feel like this might be jumping the gun, but do you feel like you're done with that world, or do you think you might return to it at some point?
I plan on returning to it. Actually, that was my plan right away when I finished, but I got a really cool deal to do a trilogy outside of this world, which is going to take another 2.5 years or so to finish up. But what I want to do is a series of shorter, more traditional urban fantasy books, 4 to 6 of them, with that takes place 20 years before this story starts. The Paternus story starts, takes place in the same world, and will involve a couple of characters that are introduced in book 3 of the Paternus trilogy. And then I want to do another trilogy that takes place 15 years or so, 15, 16 years after this story ends. So yeah, I definitely want to, as long as I live long enough, because I write so slowly,
Right.
to
Well,
do
I
that.
write quite slowly, so I'm in this. I feel your pain, or we're in this, or we're equally as wise. I don't know, one of the two. We're either fools or wise. Yeah. I mean, I do like a book a year, quite slow compared to some of our
Yeah, well, I mean,
compatriots.
yeah, but you're still faster than I am. I'm on a book a year schedule right now, but with these, it was more like a year and a half between each. So yeah, not real fast.
Can't rush these things, though.
No,
There's a lot
no,
of
no.
mythology to crank
Well,
through, right? I mean, that's a
this one, the third one almost killed me. I mean, I expected it to be long. The first book's
yeah.
126,000 words. The second one's
Mm.
136,000 words. I thought, okay, this one I've got a lot to wrap up and a lot to do, so maybe 180, and it came out 236.
Ooh. Okay,
So,
that's big. That's bigger than even
so
Unbound.
yeah, it was a crunch. And I
That's a
put
big
off
book.
I changed the release date twice. And I couldn't do it again, so I just suffered through the final throes of edits
You
and
mean you changed it on Amazon?
no, I never put it
Okay.
up. I changed it by announcing to readers because everybody
Yeah.
was a lot of people were asking, and so I would send out in my newsletter or announce on social media um, what I was doing with it, put it up on my website, and but then I would change the release date and let everybody know. People are really cool about it. Nobody gave me too much of a hassle, but yeah, it was a
I
beast.
think yeah, I think good communication helps a lot with that. So
It
well,
really, really does. And it's the same if you're running a Kickstarter too. As long as you let people know what's
mhm,
going on. But,
definitely. So I wanted to ask you about the Kickstarter in a little
okay.
bit, but I mean, this idea of all this mythology that you were looking up, like, um, there's so much, there's so we draw on a lot of mythology to get inspired for a lot of in a lot of ways, and if you really look at them, you can start to see some of those similarities. You can start to see a lot of that symbolism. It can help inform and write better stories. Were you always really interested in mythology, or did it come later in life?
Yeah.
Like, how
No,
did you get
no,
so into it?
it was I mean, I was a serious myth nerd from very, very young. I mean, I was reading kids' versions of Norse mythology when I was just little bitty. Probably. I mean, I was reading early, so I was reading before I got to kindergarten. Um, just really simple stuff, Are You My Mother and Dr. Seuss and stuff like that. But I was reading that, I started, of course, with Norse and Greek mythology, like everybody does, and Arthurian legend, right? Those are the
Yeah.
things that are most common. Um, Same time I was reading, Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, stuff like that. I was in fourth grade. I think I read A Wrinkle in Time, which kind of blew my mind. um, and so I was reading a lot of fantasy and some sci-fi um, above my grade level, which may not have been the smartest thing. But at the same time I was doing all that, I was reading as much mythology as I could. And then I got into Irish mythology and Native American mythology, Hindu mythology, Mesoamerican, um, Chinese, Japanese, African, uh, Polynesian. I've always been a real geek about it. And I always wanted to write something based in mythology. And finally I got to when I started this trilogy.
So in all that reading and all that sort of research, is there anything that you can see as being universal across like absolutely everything, or are there some mythologies that are very distinct and sit in their own islands away from everyone else?
Um, there are some that are very distinct, but I mean, they all have heroes, right?
Hmm.
They all have real evil bad guys, and they all have monsters and some form of supernatural that I have found. Maybe there are some that aren't that way. Um, and God, superpowered, you know, characters. And then if you dig deeper into in comparative mythology, talking about mythemes, which are what, how could possibly this culture and this culture have such similar particular stories or themes, right? Or both,
Yeah.
when they seem to be very, very much separated. Um, So they, people who study comparative mythology look for those kinds of things. It's like, and it's really difficult. It's like, even science, this is the way it is. Oh, we found something else, so this is the way it is. Nope.
Right.
We found something
Yeah.
else. Oh, we were wrong. This is the way it is. Of course, they never say they were wrong. They just say, and they never say, and
We've
they
updated what we what we
and
thought.
they never say, here's what we think now, right? If you talk to real scientists, very serious ones, they will talk that way. But the news and our textbooks say this is the way it is. This is the state of it now, what we think, which could change any day. They never say that. We're told, especially on the news, this is the fact. Oh, this is the fact. Oh, now this is the fact. Whereas they're,
And the same
it's
holds
very
true for
difficult.
even looking at
Same,
stories. I mean, history is
yes,
the same. I mean,
exactly. Yep.
people will, a really good historians will say like, well, we currently think this, but when you get a documentary or whatever, it's this thing is absolutely the way it was,
Yes,
and it's like that's
right.
probably, but
Not
in some
true.
cases, yes, probably where you've got a
Yeah.
document with a date on it, but otherwise,
Yeah.
why something
And
happened, the why and the how is the key
yeah.
thing,
And the
and that's
longer
always
you're alive, the more you see that. Because, it's like, the age of the earth has changed in my lifetime. It's a couple times. The cause of the destruction of the dinosaurs
from
has
4,000
changed
years.
a couple times.
See, I think you're a being from Mythos. So they used to. So you were around when they said it was 4,000 years old, right? Now it's is that the change?
I was probably the one who said that.
Oh,
And I kept
it's like
telling people the
Inception.
earth is flat. The earth is flat.
So of all the mythologies, do you have a favorite? Is that like asking a favorite child question?
Yeah, kind of. I still have a huge fondness for um Arthurian legend kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And Irish mythology too, but and Norse, I can't help it. I just love that stuff. But Hindu mythology is really, really, really right up there easily. That came later, but it's so broad,
Hmm.
and the scope is almost more epic than even the Titanomachy and the Gigantomachy, the great wars between the gods and the Titans. In Greek mythology, it's just so huge, and then it changes. Uh, these gods that were called this are now called this, and this person, instead of being born like this and being like this, is actually like this and like this, as you move through like the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and a lot of the older scriptures, the Vedic scriptures and the Puranic scriptures. The differences between the two are a lot of similarities and a lot of the same characters, but some things do change. And you study why does that happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, on those cultures specifically, I know essentially next to nothing in terms of their myths.
Yeah.
Um, it's probably quite bad.
I just love that stuff. So I think Vedic and Puranic Hindu mythologies are the ones that I probably drew from the most for this trilogy. I mean, I draw a lot of them, but those I probably drew on the most.
Yeah, I get a sense of that from the cover of the third one, which is Wrath, right? Wrath of Gods.
And I never even thought about it, but then I realized the first one, the monster there is Mahisha or Mahishasura, buffalo demon from Hindu mythology. The second one in the back is Naga from Lord of Snakes from Hindu mythology. And this one, of course, also from Hindu mythology, right? So it's, yeah, I guess that was that was a big that was a big influence. Norse probably second, um, English, Arthurian, Irish probably third. But then a lot of them are kind of on the same level after that.
Any Scottish? I don't know if we have some stuff, but it gets all woven
Yeah,
up Arthur and
I,
things. It's a bit muddied.
I've looked at a lot of it, but yeah, it gets mixed in with Irish and English, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's hard to I think some of the Irish and English is more separated simply because they're on an island, you know.
Hmm.
So that things were able to develop differently, but I think a lot of this uh, I wouldn't be surprised, and I've seen authors talk about historians, people who study mythology, um, say that probably a lot of the old Scottish, got absorbed and appropriated um, by the English mostly, and in some cases by the Irish as well. So
Yeah, the
they got
really old stuff,
or forgotten or buried.
pre-conquest stuff, before and when it was both the Picts and and Alba, yeah, all that's probably kind of blurred and lost. I have wondered sometimes, especially hearing you sort of talk about it through like whether the sort of William Wallace and all that kind of period of time is very mythologized and romanticized
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. A lot of wars of so-called independence often are.
Hmm.
But without our own King Arthur legend and without some of these more obvious deep
Well,
mythologies, I do wonder
some
whether
is
that time gets
yeah,
turned into that.
some claim that Arthur was Scottish.
Yeah. But then they say he's also Welsh, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah.
all really interesting stuff. And what's sad is that how much has been lost or was destroyed, right? I mean, we find Sumerian tablets, we find, these different things, Mesopotamian or anywhere, Mesoamerican, anywhere. We find things, and unfortunately there were cultures, in particular the Catholic Church, basically destroyed a lot of stuff. Even in Scandinavia, um, we're lucky to even have the Norse myth stuff. Um, the uh, it's We're lucky to have any of it because they destroyed just a shitload of it. And luckily, Snorri Sturluson, who actually was Catholic, um, translated. So at least we have that. But a lot of the original stuff is just gone.
Yeah.
So who
Yeah.
knows?
That's a
Who
shame. Who
knows
knows?
what? Who knows what else we've lost? As countries conquer other countries, they just wipe shit out.
Yeah. Do you see any of the kind of almost like with things like Marvel is essentially like a modern day mythology
Yeah,
creation, where
yeah,
you look we there's a sort of sense of like we've lost some of there's not really a let's say an American mythology or like we don't necessarily have a modern day mythology, so to speak, but those characters are a lot of them are current day people, and then and so it kind of fits with the time in some ways. I wonder if
yeah.
you
They are.
clearly before in it, but
They're modern
if we
day myths. I mean, these people are gods to a certain extent.
yeah.
And in comics, Marvel, stuff like that, go as far as to basically say they're gods, like elementals,
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any denying that that stuff grows directly out of mythologies.
Yeah. And so in 1,000 years from now, people will think Iron Man was an actual worship god
You never
of
know,
early 21st century America.
right? Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny too because, you'll read books and they'll talk about, this is the way it was 1,000 years ago, and this is the way it was 2,000 years ago. And the fact is that the actual amount of original, stuff that we can draw on is very tiny.
Hmm.
And very often what is there is skewed through the point of view of the person who wrote it. So we really
Yeah.
don't know a whole lot of stuff just that long ago, let alone, saying this happened 60 million years ago. It's really hard to tell.
Well, it's like we don't know who wrote Beowulf or any, stuff like that. It's a bit like the
Yeah.
Homer, right? It could have been
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people. It could have been a big oral tradition. Like no
Yeah.
one really knows.
Nope.
It's just assigned to like a person. We
Yeah.
drag at the mists of time. So when did you first have the idea to kind of bash all this into a melting pot and make a epic fantasy trilogy about it?
Um, I had just I had been in Los Angeles working on screenplays. I came back to the or to Ohio, went back to school to get my PhD in film studies, and did that for 10 years, and didn't really get to read or write at all, other than scholarly academic stuff. And then I left that in 2010. Spring of 2010 was my last semester in my full-time teaching position, tenure track teaching position, so I could teach online. And then I found I had time to read again. And then in late spring, early summer of 2011, I was reading, catching up on all this great stuff and fun stuff, and thought, wait a minute, I could write a book if I want to now, or at least try. So I kind of just started half-ass messing around in 2011. And the first book didn't come out until May of 2016.
Yeah, I was
So
trying to remember when it came out. It was 2016, wasn't it?
yeah, it was, I actually got it up on Amazon a day a day or two before. I think it was the day before the SPFBO closed,
Okay.
right?
So you got right in at the
And
final
I
final one.
actually was like 298, number 298 of 300 that they allow. So I almost didn't
Yeah.
get in at all.
Wow. That would
Yeah.
have been one of those forks in the road, right? If you hadn't been in
It would, yeah,
that
that's
year,
a
we maybe
complete,
wouldn't have all. For those listening
no.
later that don't know what we're talking about, the SPFBO stands for the Self Publishing Fantasy Blog Off, which is run by Mark Lawrence.
Mhm.
I think the first year was 2015.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure 2016 was the second year. And
Mhm.
so indie fantasy writers submit, and they take 300 a year, and there's 10 blogs. So each blog that volunteers to take part and to take like 30 of these books. And then they kind of whittle it down like a kind of X Factor or what these sort of reality shows in some ways. They like review them, they discuss them, they select the ones that will move on to the
Survivor.
next round
It's
and
like
so forth.
Survivor.
It's like Survivor, yeah. Um, the Bachelor, except there's no roses. It's just you're just out. There is
Yeah.
no um, and so yeah, and so the idea is it's just to highlight and bring attention to good indie works and things. And a whole bunch of people, some of them who we will speak to in the future, some of them who may already been guests. I can't quite remember who was the original crew at this point, but a sort of
There
bunch
were,
of us
it's
in that
called,
in that
yeah,
in that
yeah.
2016 year group kind of met each other online because of it through Twitter and Facebook, and sort of became writing buddies and um, a therapy group as well, as much as anything.
Definitely.
and and the rest has been history. So if Dirk hadn't made that group, he might have gone through a whole different cohort, and that would have been
Yeah.
disastrous for
Yeah.
us. Because
Well, well, thank you. It would have been disastrous for me because, I still to this day, I did make it as a finalist in Fantasy Factions group. Out of the 30 that they had, I was the finalist. So what is in the was in the final 10. Um, and then ended up placing third score wise, behind Phil Tucker and Jonathan French. And those guys are great buddies of mine, and plus a bunch of the other folks that were in there to this day. And it if it weren't for that, because and suddenly I knew all these bloggers, so getting reviews for further books and stuff was not nearly as difficult.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I knew a lot of other authors, and it started getting attention. And I firmly believe that no one basically would have heard of the Paternus Trilogy today if it weren't for that. Unless something else big had come along. I think just advertising on Amazon and Facebook just wouldn't have done it. Big difference.
Maybe just because what you were writing is quite unique and niche, and it would have been hard to find that existing
Right.
audience.
That's exactly why I think that. It's like, we know a lot of authors who do very little social media stuff, right? And they don't run cool discords, who do far better than either one of us do, right? Sales wise, and we do okay. But I think it's been absolutely critical to the ongoing success of the trilogy, of my trilogy, because of what you said. Exactly, because it's urban fantasy, but it's not urban fantasy, right? It's not your typical
Yeah.
either paranormal romance type or romantic type.
Which detective vampire
Yeah.
hunter?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not or the wizard demon hunter with a franchise. They have a bookstore or a tea room, or they're a private investigator, right? It's not like that. It's set up much more like an epic fantasy, but it takes place today in this world. So it's a weird kind of book. Plus I wrote it in present tense. So
Yeah, that's also a little weird, but I mean, it worked out. Like,
it worked out
well, okay.
okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, and I think that's actually an interesting. I never really thought of just being a finalist helps open a lot of doors in the
Yeah.
future to those blogs.
Yep.
Which even if you don't win, that's such a big,
Just
such a
being a
big win.
finalist is
Yeah.
is a huge win. Huge win. Yeah.
Alas, I have not made it to these exalted heights. Perhaps one day.
There are people watching us. I see them.
There are some
Well,
people here.
there's a cat watching us, and an anime character, at
An
least.
angry looking cat.
Yes. Or in pain or really pissed off. It's hard to tell.
Remember, guys, if you want to leave some questions for us or just for Dirk or whatever you'd like to do, you can put that in the Q&A channel, and we'll get to those.
They're typing in
Get to
Dyrk
those.
sucks. Make him go away.
So you had you always wanted to write? It sounds like this sort of came over you all of a sudden, or had you always had a little inclining to write a book?
I always wanted to write. I wrote short stories for myself from the time I was 6. I wrote a book when I was in first grade. It was a crayon, stapled together book called The Human Zoo, where like this walking, talking bear and his son go through this zoo, and there are all these different kinds of people in the cages instead of the other way around. So it's a little goofy even then. It was like 20 pages or more, but it and then I kept writing short stories. I never tried to submit anything. I actually tried to write a novel that I never finished when I was in high school, and that was of course we're talking before computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before people had computers in their homes to do such things with. So it was all handwritten with pencil. And I kind of finished it, but never went back and rewrote it or worked on it or anything like that. And then I was writing screenplays, uh, and trying to get representation in screenplays read. Wrote a Bible for a TV series. I had stuff read by Scott Free, Ridley Scott and his brother's company.
Yeah.
and they liked it. I had it read by
Very cool.
New Line Cinema,
You can
which is
say
no
that.
longer around, but they were big in the 90s. And they liked it. The TV show thing got optioned by American Zoetrope TV, which was Francis Ford Coppola's television company. But then it got turned down by the financiers out of Canada. So I had a lot of cool things going on with the different screenplays, but nothing ever really happened. So I have been writing for a long time. I've always liked writing, and then I, wrote a lot of academic stuff. I wrote my dissertation on the Lord of the Rings and a French philosopher named Gilles Deleuze. So yeah, I've always been writing one way or another, and I did always want to write a book, and I always wanted to write this mythology thing. And then finally had time to do it. So
Yeah. So what of the two, right? Because I know some people that have done both screenplays and novels, and it sounds like such a different art form. And so, like, do you
it
prefer one
is.
or the other? Do you like them both equally?
Um, I do like them both equally. There are things that you can do that I really enjoy with novels that you cannot do with screenplays, but there are things that you learn about writing and characterization and story from writing screenplays that you generally don't see in a whole lot of books. So part of my approach to, I always used to hate, people said, this book is very cinematic, you know, and I'd be like, actually, no, not really. It's not.
No.
So, so I actually wanted to do a book that was far more cinematic. And part of the reason I wrote this in present tense is screenplays are always written in present tense because everything is supposed to be happening right now on the screen.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and you have to keep things very, very concise. Luckily, with books, you can have inner thoughts without having a voiceover. You can do things um, that you can't do with screenplays, but you can do things with screenplays that you can't do with books too. So I
When you were saying that there are things of characterization specifically in screenplays that are done, I don't know if you mean that they're done better than they
no,
are in novels, or like
they're
what?
they're done differently. They have to be. You have to create a character in you cannot say in a screen you can't say in a screenplay Bob is grew up in blah 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 and his father was like this, so here's the kind of character you're going to see on the screen. You can't do that. Anything that you want to do with the character has to be done um, on screen. You have to either hear it or see it, right? To
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
anything that's happening at all. You can't just throw in a little background about somebody. Um, and you have to be very concise with descriptions of settings and locations and characters, which is good because I went the other way. I was like, woohoo, I can describe this character. I can take 5 pages doing it if I want to. And I kind of did in the first book anyway. Well, I felt it was important. So I wanted that immediacy of present tense because I really enjoyed it in books like The Hunger Games. Um, and and in I read everything. I read teen, I read middle grade, I read grade, you know, uh, school stuff. I read YA. I read all that stuff. Present tense is pretty common in YA. And what I like about it is that immediacy, like it's happening right now. And I really enjoyed it in those books. Plus, I wanted to make this more a cinematic experience, and screenplays are written in present tense for that reason. So some people
Oh,
absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate present tense. So, but that's okay. I didn't
I
write it for
don't.
them.
I
I
haven't.
wrote it. I wrote it for me.
Yeah, and it works. I mean, it's very, when I think of present tense books, Paternus is one of them, possibly because like in sort of the more traditional epic fantasy vein, it's almost all third person, third
Yeah, it's
limited,
never,
but
yeah, it's never, but like Red Rising and The Handmaid's Tale, The Girl with All the Gifts, those are all present tense.
mm,
People, I don't hear anybody whining about it in those, you know.
no. I don't mind reading it. I think at first it can be a bit weird. After a while, you get used to it. But
Yeah.
I tried
If you're
writing
not,
it once.
yeah, like
I
anything
tried
else,
to
if you're not used to it, it can be jarring. Yeah.
yeah. I tried it for Battlespire. I tried writing in present tense at first, and I think I got like 2 or 3 chapters in, and then it started to break down. Or I just couldn't sort of naturally keep it up. I had to really
Hmm.
focus to make it into that. I
Yeah.
didn't think it was adding too much, but I gave it a go, and it might have been interesting to have the book in present tense. But I was already switching from third limited to first person, so I thought that was probably enough of a change.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
the project I'm writing now um, is in past tense, right?
yeah,
Um, and it's not, the Paternus books are not first person, but they are present tense. And the uh, but the thing I'm writing now is past tense, but I constantly have to go back and fix because
catch yourself.
I
Right.
fall into the present tense again. I'm getting better at it now, but it's pretty easy to just go back and change. It's just time consuming. Um, and I usually only, and sometimes I'll have all a bunch of paragraphs in past and then one whole paragraph in conversation in present and then, back to past tense. And I'm like, gotta fix it.
It's
And
interesting you say that
I
because
think the past tense works a lot better for this story.
right, it's interesting you say that about the cinematic stuff. I think I've been influenced by watching a lot of movies when I was very young. Not to say that I'm writing cinematically, but I seem to have a habit of writing any chapter almost like one really long scene that all sort of
Hmm.
happens
Yeah.
almost within this, not always, but more or less in the space of time that it kind of feels that is allotted to it. Like
Yep.
it's just the things are happening, and then it's like a really long scene that ends. And I very rarely have chapters where there's lots of time breaks and lots of prose that skips over a bunch of time and things like that. It's
Right.
usually very immediate. It's third limited in its past tense, but it's kind of you're kind of seeing something happen in full, and then
Right.
I'll go somewhere else and sort of see something
Right.
else happen in full. And I
Yeah.
do wonder whether that's a effect of like seeing a lot of TV and cinema and things, and that somewhat cinematic, but not really. But
And that's actually, I think, a lot more common in all kinds of books today, no matter how they're written. That sort of, one contiguous place and time is a scene,
mhm, yeah,
in a film, and then you jump back and forth. But in film, it's called parallel editing, right? Where you'll have multiple, like I do it fairly often, especially in the great big battle where there are a ton of different people, where just like if you have a big battle in a film, you can cut from these people on this part of the
yeah,
field to these people on this part of the field to these people in another, and you just put a space and maybe, a
mhm,
dot, 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 or whatever in between those to show that if it is a chapter, you know that it is in a one kind of contiguous, or they're all happening at about the same time. But anytime I switch locations or the point of view of characters, I would break I would break that. So there's a lot of that parallel stuff going on, and you'll see that in a lot of books, but maybe more so my in the last third, the big battle in War of Gods. But Joe Abercrombie does it too. He does it a lot in his battles, where you'll have these little snippets all happening at the same
yeah.
time through a battle. He does a really cool one in the second book of his new trilogy. Um, and then does it again a couple of more times in the third book. And I think he does it a little bit in the first book, but more so in the second and third. But he does that too, where at the same time, even though this thing is happening at the same time, you'll get these different points of view of these different characters going on.
Yeah, I think no, it's definitely a more modern take, and it may well have come from
Yeah,
film. You don't see it in those older
yeah,
books. Everything's a
yeah.
little
Yeah,
more
film,
ponderous, a
film,
little more
yeah,
like who knows how much time is going on here. We don't know.
yeah.
It's just
Film
yeah.
has been a huge influence on authors for a long time, but I think even more so today when people can see a lot more films.
Mhm.
Um, and then more recently, role-playing games and video games have been a
Yeah.
huge influence. I mean, it's really obvious to me when I'm reading a book and this person is a role-playing game player, big into it. You can see it. And some books don't hide it. They just basically that's what they want to base their stuff on. And I love those books too. Um, but it is a
But
huge
this is
influence.
where like the really hard, intricate kind of gamified magic systems have come from. Basically,
Hmm.
it's come from the RPGs,
Hmm. Yep. Yeah.
and,
Even
and it's
in
great.
things like Brandon Sanderson's books, they aren't progression fantasy or lit RPG or cultivation fantasy, but they have a lot of those seeds in it because that
Yeah,
stuff all comes from games.
some people love it, some people hate it. It's all good
But that's
both.
like everything else.
Exactly. So are you, dare I say, are you a pantser, Dirk, or are
No,
you a plotter?
I'm a plotter. I have to. Um, I cannot hold all the information in my head. Um, and I also get extremely anxious if I don't know exactly what's coming next. So I outline. Now, what I'll do sometimes is outline out as far as I can because I'm like I don't really know how it's going to feel once I get there. So I'll do that, and then I'll get up there, and then I'll outline some more. And I will sometimes, well, with this trilogy, every time I would go back and re-outline.
Hmm.
No, okay, I don't go back and re-outline. Other than book one, which was two books that I cut down to one book. Uh, the other ones, I've never really thrown away a chapter. I've reconfigured it and maybe moved it a little bit, but I've never thrown away a huge amount. So I usually have a pretty good sense of where I can sense where I don't know where it's going right now, right? In fact, I didn't know where book one and book two would end, um, because they're really much more of a one continuous story, kind of like Game of Thrones is.
Yes.
Even though
Yeah.
they all have kind of a discrete thing, they really kind of don't. They just pick up and just keep going from where they stopped. Um, I'm thinking of the last book in Game of Thrones where it just kind of goes and goes and goes and then kind of stops. You know,
Yeah, because
it's
that was one book. That was one giant book split into two, and really, it was yeah, yeah,
yeah.
really
I have
heavily.
to. I have to.
It's
I
like
love. I love those books. I usually don't read long series, and I love those books. But that last book was a slog.
yeah,
I'll still
Dance
read
that
if he ever finishes it. I'll read it. But that last book was a slog to
sunk
me.
cost fallacy. No, Dan,
Yeah.
Dance was just like you're clearly building to like a battle at Winterfell and also a battle at Marine with the Nemesis, and it just sort of ends before we get there. But the whole bloody book is building up to these two big,
Yeah.
you know, climax points. These two big battles, and these are going to be huge and shifting, and it's going to solve a lot of plot points. And then it's like it just ends just before they're about to begin.
And it's just
It's quite
it's
annoying.
it, and it's just yet another series of going from this place to certain characters just going to find something or someone. and they just go through these little towns, and they go to these other little places, and they go to these other places, and they have a little fight, and then they go to these other places, and it's like But I found
Yeah,
that to be
I've
true of
gone through
every.
I've gone through the whole thing twice.
I
I've gone
found
through the
that to
whole
be
thing a
true
few
of
times.
every long series that I've read. There have been books
Every
like
long
that.
series.
Every
They
long
always get tedious. Yeah.
they always have one or two books that are just like they really didn't even need to be there. A lot of that could have been condensed in a couple of other things, but it's been a long time since I read a long series. Very
What's the
long, actually.
longest what's the longest series you've read?
Probably like I said, a long time. It's probably the Chronicles of Narnia, believe it or not. Probably the last really long series. I've never read Malazan or the Wheel of Time. I've read first books in a lot of long series, but today it's rare actually that I'll finish a trilogy. Just because I have such a voracious appetite for different writing styles and different kinds of stories, and it's probably to my own detriment. But it's really hard for me to invest in something that's 5 to 25 books long.
Sure. No, I get that. I mean, I mostly read or listen to book ones, and it's very rare that I'll go through the whole thing just
Yeah,
because, as you say, like you're picking it up to give it a go. You want to see what they're all about, but yeah, especially if you come to something where you're behind the times and there's like 8 books in it, you think, nah, unless I'm
yeah,
absolutely blown away. But it's very difficult now. I'm sure a
yeah,
lot of us are in the same boat where it's hard for us. We've seen behind the looking glass, we've seen behind the curtain and looked at
yeah,
us like we know a
yeah.
little bit too much about how it's done. So
Yeah, I
it's
think
less.
there is that. There are some books that there's some series that I absolutely just finish. Um, Abercrombie. When I pick up an Abercrombie series, I finish it. But his are three books
Mhm.
long. Um, Books of Babel, Josiah Bancroft. I'm on book 4 now, and I haven't read a full trilogy in a very long time. And this is 4 books, and I'm reading that. And next up is Free Bastards, which is the final book in Lotlands by Jonathan French. So I'll be reading that. But I try to sample as much stuff as I possibly can. And it's hard because I read slowly. I only get through between 10 or 12 and 15 books a year, which for a lot of readers is not many at all. I do read every night,
I'm
but I
slow.
read slowly. Yeah.
I read slowly. I
Yeah.
can listen. I can listen to more books. But I
Yeah,
read slowly.
I can't do audiobooks. I
Uh,
can't. I don't have a commute. I could do it in a car. But I don't have a commute, so I work at home and I write at home. Um, and I don't travel long trips enough to, and then I might listen to as much as I could, and then I would never pick it up again, because I just and my because otherwise my mind wanders, and I can't be listening when I'm working, or to something else when I'm working or when I'm writing, because my mind just wanders too easily. It's not, yeah. So I can't do audiobooks. I kind of wish I had that kind of job that I could do that, but I can't. Um, so, and my mind just doesn't work that way. So,
yeah, fair enough. It's not for everyone. It's
yeah.
been a real game changer for me. I've said this many times. People will be bored of me hearing it. Just how much audio and listening. I think I've always listened more than I've read in some ways, and so um, it's really good for me. I
Hmm.
can't imagine.
Well,
I know I'm
they
I
talk
know I'm
about,
enjoying
yeah,
audiobooks because I know that I get excited to do the dishes and things like that. You know,
right.
that's when
Yeah.
you know you're enjoying it because you just want to put it on at all points, any excuse to put it on, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's a feeling I don't really get reading. I don't get too excited anymore picking something up, but when I'm really gripped by an audiobook, yeah, that still has the same feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I was like that, but I guess, they talk about auditory listeners, tactile listeners, visual or learners, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's an education thing, and some people just are more that way. I'm a reader. I just have
Mm.
always been a reader.
Yeah, I mean, audio, I think, might be my thing because I love podcasts. I feel like I remember stuff from podcasts easier than if I read it. Like if I read
Yeah.
stuff, I'd have to really
Yeah.
try to memorize it in some ways, but I can just
Oh, that's
listen to
absolutely
podcasts and
legit.
yeah, and it goes, I suck all this information up. Oh, I just love listening to it and really long conversations, even if they whittle on about nothing. Like I love all that. I love it a lot more than just trying to look at a textbook or something. And perhaps that's always been the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would explain a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think I interrupted you. It seemed like you were going to jump in with a question or something.
Oh no.
No? No.
It certainly wasn't anything wise or insightful. Guaranteed. No, I don't
So
remember.
that's fine. So you've been at this now for about well, almost essentially as long as I have. What has been the most eye-opening experience of being an indie publisher, of self-publishing?
Um, I knew it was going to be a lot of work. Because self-publishing is like starting up your own business. You know, you have to handle, everything from R&D through, you know, production and development and you have to pay all the bills and deal with all the advertising and all of the marketing and all of the publicity, which is, what we're doing right now is basically publicity, right? And it can take a lot of time. Hello. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work, but most of what I did was producing in commercials and industrial films, low budget features, and a spec pilot for TV and stuff like that, and production management, which means breaking down the scripts and scheduling and making sure all of the crew is there, hiring, dealing with all the contracts. So that's extremely complicated. So this stuff, as far as organizing, is pretty easy for
Hmm.
me. Well, it's not easy, but it's something that I don't have a
It's
lot of
easier.
trouble with. But it's a
Yeah.
lot of time. It does take a lot of time. So that was pretty eye-opening, and also just how cool most of the people in the community are, other authors. So those I think would be the two most eye-opening things for
Yeah.
me.
It's amazing how much time all the non-writing things take up.
Yeah,
You know,
and they and
you
it
think
it's
I'll just knock
yeah,
this out in half an hour, whatever it is, and it's never the case. Never, no matter
no.
what it is, it
And you really have
goes
to
on.
pick your battles because, in particular, that kind of thing outside of the writing, it will take up whatever time you allot, right? And more. Um, and you have to decide, am I going to do a lot of newsletters? Right? Am I going to do a lot of social media posts? Am I going to do a podcast? Am I
Mm.
going to do all of the social? Am I going to do now? Am I going to do TikTok as well as Instagram and Twitter and Facebook?
TikTok is the
And
great existential question right now, isn't it?
yeah,
Everyone's like,
well, I
should
just
I be
won't.
doing this? Can I be bothered? You know,
I won't. I will not for any number of reasons. And one thing is I cannot pick up any one more thing. I just can't.
yes,
Uh,
it's one bridge too far. I can't
Yeah,
right now.
well,
I
and
just
there are a
can't. I
lot of
don't.
there are a lot of things I just don't do. I don't keep up my website as much as I should. I don't blog. I don't, there are a lot of things that I just don't do. And sometimes it's, we're better suited for some things than other things, and some things I simply don't enjoy. So I just don't do them. And unless they're absolutely necessary, I just don't, you know and Michael and I have been having conversations in a writers group about Facebook ads. I mean, that's the half the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that we talk about is, what's going on with Facebook ads, and that's one of the recent
What have
things
they
that he and I
broken
have
this
been
time?
talking about. Yeah, what have they broken this thing time? Because everything changes. It changes all the time.
Seemingly for no reason. It just sometimes it just seems to change the sake of change, or at least that's how it appears to us. And
then
you just get to
sometimes
grips with it for 5 minutes, and then they've changed it again. And
and then sometimes something that has been exactly like this for 9 months, for almost
yeah,
12 months, almost a year, is now like
and then
not like
gone.
that anymore. For the
Yeah,
better or the worst, it's simply not like that anymore. And that's what we've been talking about. It's like, it makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
yes. Whereas the writing is somewhat eternal. Just focus on that.
Yeah.
Maybe pick one social media platform that you like,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
go for it. I think
Yep.
I worry about anyone that tries to do every single platform and every single thing, because you would not do anything else but that stuff. Like it's
Yeah. I would say for
um,
new authors, try some things, try blogging, try the various social medias. Um, and if they don't work for you, just stop. I don't do a lot of social media, but I do it on a regular basis because I actually enjoy it, and it's how I keep in contact with a lot of friends and fans. Um, but like I said before, we both know people who don't do it at all or very little and sell a hell of a lot more books than I do. I mean, a hell of a lot more books than I do. So it's just, and
yeah,
they don't
those are
blog,
my
they
inspirations right
don't
now.
blog and really put out
No,
newsletters too. It's just, it's different things
yeah, those are my inspirations right now. Those folks trying to move a little more in that direction.
to be able to do
Uh,
that. Yeah.
wouldn't it be
Yep.
great? Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
great? Yeah, I know people that
And
don't
then,
have
and
mailing
then,
lists and not
and
anything.
then there's like Will White who doesn't do any advertising because he doesn't have to. So he
Well,
doesn't have to, he has to, one, doesn't have to spend that money. Two, doesn't have to spend any of that time messing around with all that shit that we have to mess around with.
slowly but surely. I mean, things build. I mean, I'm spending less now than I was a year ago. Like I think over
So,
time you can push in that direction
so
for
am
sure.
I. I started spending more when my trilogy audiobook came out because that's
Yeah,
my first foray into Facebook ads, but it paid itself back and much more. So it's been absolutely worth it. But
yeah. I mean, that's the pretty that's the
there have been some
that
ups
one.
and downs. There are sometimes when you spend more money than you make, you know, and you just got to tweak and mess around and try to get it so that you're spending that you're making a good deal more than you're spending. Right?
That is the trick.
Exactly.
Not always an easy one to pull off, but it
Yeah,
looks like the audio set has done very well for you.
it has. I have been shocked. And I was absolutely thrilled the first couple, 2, 3 months. I'm just like, wow, I never expected it to do this well. Um, and then I have my budget spreadsheets and cash flow where I track ranks and what they're making, plus I have my own for my own income and stuff like
Yeah,
that, and those things are interrelated. And so in my own income from that, I was constantly having the amount that would come in from audiobook sales drop a little bit every month or a lot. And until like a month or two ago, it came out last December, until till like last month, just because I was spending a whole lot more and the ads weren't working right over the last couple of months. I was the income did go down, but still nowhere near what I had projected, and it's just hung in there. And then this month, it's back to really great levels of a few months ago again, and it's just like I just never know. I expected it to peter out, like have that decay,
yeah,
like
yeah.
anything else. Now the ebooks have decayed.
Mm.
That has gone down, and I need to figure out a way to boost that again. But the audiobook just keeps hanging in there. Just when I think
Audio is
it's
great.
on its
Audio
way
is
out, it just
can
keeps
be
coming
quite
back.
sticky.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think audio, at least for now, touch wood, find some wood, because don't want to jinx it, but it's even more pushing a boulder up a hill. It's even harder to get anywhere. If you can get somewhere, I think it's just the way the store works at the moment. It is a little stickier,
yeah,
so it is worth the effort if you can sustain that push up the hill.
Right.
At least have I ever sent you that? I've got an Excel document with all my data in it. I think I sent you something once. Did they send you the whole sheet, or did they just send you a screenshot?
I think I just got a screenshot, but we should share. I'll send you mine and you
Yeah.
send me yours, and we'll geek out on our spreadsheets.
We'll geek out, guys, about ranks and unit cells and all the fun stuff that we do in the background here
Yep,
to keep
yep.
going. Yeah. The stuff you won't hear on the Trad Offer podcast.
No.
Excel sheets and
Yeah, spreadsheets.
P
Yeah.
and L charts.
Yeah, oh God, yeah. Yeah. It's
Those guys have it easy there. They don't do any of this stuff.
That's right. All I have to do is write their books and show up to a couple of signings. No.
They get put on tours and out there. Yeah. It's equally tough for many reasons.
Trad is hard. Trad is hard in some ways that indie is not. When you really don't have control, ultimately, that can be very, very difficult and painful.
I mean, there's so many instances where if the books had just been the way they were and I wasn't able to change them, or I couldn't have convinced someone to change them, there's no way I would have got anywhere, because there were a few fatal flaws here and there, a cover that needed changed, or whatever it may be.
Same here.
I could just
my
do
original
it.
cover.
Yeah.
My original cover and a few little tweaks in the story from my first book that came out. Big difference. And if I wanted a new cover, we can actually, if we want to redo the cover, we actually just can. We just do it. Yeah.
And I've done that. I've switched 2 covers and it's been astronomically better each time. Yeah. So, and I redrafted the first Dragon's Blade book before the box set, and then I expanded the ending to the trilogy, 6 months after it finished from feedback, and you can just do that stuff.
Yeah.
And it really helps, because if I hadn't been able to do those things, if it had just sort of sat in stone, I wouldn't have got anywhere. So
yeah, and that doesn't happen in Trad. They will add new covers every once in a while, though I'm not sure why. Probably just to sell more books to existing fans. Usually that happens.
Collector items, yeah.
Yeah, that's like Harry Potter. Did they really need to ever change the covers on that? No, never. But you got
the 20th anniversary editions where it's the same cover, but one's red, one's blue, one's yellow, one's green, right? So then people that are super fans buy 4 of the same book, 4 of the exact same book, just to have it.
And now we can't really do that unless we do like a Kickstarter for a special fancy signed numbered edition. But our fans, how many different versions of our books are they really going to buy? We might have some we might have some people who would buy them all, right? But would it be enough to be worth the cost?
Probably not worth the hassle. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to ask you one last thing before we shoot off. Kind of a bit like a sense of the eye-opening experiences. But if you could go way back before you launched Paternus, and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Get a different cover. Get a different cover and hire a real typography designer, cover designer. I mean, everything was kind of a joy early on. Everything, because I got so lucky with the SPFBO. So, there are things that could have been changed with the first book. But even now, I would say I wouldn't go back and change it, because that was the book that I wanted to read at that time. So I wouldn't tell myself to, instead of doing this, do that, right? Because I did exactly what I wanted to do, and it was kind of an experiment. I wrote a book that I really wanted to read written the way I wanted to read it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and part of it was I wanted to see if it worked, and I never expected anyone to like it, right? Um, really, I didn't think there were that many people out there that were as weird as I was that would enjoy the book. And then so I was blown away anytime I found out that somebody did like it, let alone read it, you know. Um, it got more stress. One thing I would tell myself is when it comes to book two and especially book three, don't stress so much. Because especially when I was finishing the trilogy, I mean, book two, everybody talks about the book two problems with book twos of a trilogy, right? So I worried a lot about that. And then it was like having to finish the whole thing. And at that point, people had expectations, which a lot of people had expectations that I really wanted to meet. I still wrote the books that I like, but I did have that in the back of my mind, whereas I never had that in the first book. I never really worried about what people were thinking. Now, I did have some readers that gave me some cool advice to do about some things, and I was like, at first, it's like, no, and then it's like, you know what? I had my fun. I wrote this way, and I did this. The question I have to ask myself is, if I do it this other way, and probably more people would like it, would I still like it? And if the answer is yes, then there's no reason not to make that change. If the answer is no, I'm not going to do it, right? Just because somebody or a couple people even say it really needs to have this or that. If I wouldn't like that in a book, I won't do it, right? I just can't make myself do it.
Yeah, I think that, I mean that you're spot on in terms of taking advice. There was two things in that I thought were really interesting, and one is don't sweat the sequels as much, even though we do, and I should probably take that advice because currently, as per usual, I'm sweating buckets over over the sequel, over book three. I'm like, "Ugh."
Yeah,
And this is the series is probably going to be, it's not going to be a trilogy. You know, I thought for a while it might be six books. I think now it might be five. Um, and that's a little daunting because this means I'm only, if when I complete book three, I've only just got over halfway, which feels, and they're quite big books, and so that's a little scary. And can I keep this up? And you start spiraling, and oh my god. But
hmm. Oh yeah,
all that sweating and all that fuss just sort of paralyzes you, and you procrastinate. And so,
yeah, yep,
but it's hard to escape from. So yeah, try not to overly sweat it, but it's almost impossible not to. But I like what
yeah,
you said, how in the beginning it was all a joy. Um, and I think that was true for me too. I think in the beginning, even though you didn't really know, I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. I blundered in thinking I knew what I was doing, and I didn't. And I made plenty of mistakes, and but everything felt really fun the first time round. Like the first time you got the book in your hand, that was incredible. The first time you
oh
got
yeah,
a review, like a 5-star review, that was incredible. The first time of everything was really, really fun. And
yeah,
now like things are happening that I couldn't have dreamed 6 years ago. But somehow a little bit of that joy has I feel like grizzled in some ways from it. But so
yeah,
yeah, I guess if you were to go back, I'd maybe tell myself to try and enjoy all the first stuff
yeah,
while you can, because you're not going to be a debut fresh face forever. Eventually
yeah.
you're going to be browbeaten and
Yeah. Well, one thing I
and
would, one thing I would tell other people that they should tell themselves if they could go back would be, don't sweat bad reviews. I didn't have a problem um, with bad reviews because I worked in Los Angeles in the film business, right? And I
right.
acted also, right? So you get a pretty thick hide working in that environment. So I knew there were people that wouldn't like it. Um, Sometimes it made me mad when what I thought they were saying was just stupid. Um, And usually it's things like none of it bothers me anymore, but it's usually people trying to write a lot as if they're a whole lot smarter and know a whole lot more and have read a whole lot more than they really have. Um, and what they are saying is law because they learned it in their MFA or because of whatever. But I was also older, I was in my 50s when my book came out, and had lived and worked and done a lot of things that most first writers haven't experienced. So it didn't bother me as much, but I can truly understand how it could be devastating to get some bad reviews early on. But go look, anybody who does that, just go look at some of the most popular books of all time on Goodreads and click on and search the 1-star reviews, and
Those are the one stars.
you will find a shitload of them, and people who absolutely hate books that everyone else loves, so it's gonna happen. I mean, most successful authors have some really, really scathing reviews of their books, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. And I think that's a good note to end on.
Yep, if you
Don't
take
panic,
nothing, if you take
as Douglas
nothing,
Adams says.
yeah, don't panic. If you take nothing else from this, don't worry. Be happy.
Dyrk Ashton, 2020.
Well, thanks for having me.
we'll make
This is fun. It's good to
Oh, it's
see
great
you.
having you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah. As I
yeah,
say, hopefully I can get over to the States next year. Hopefully we can work that out, or
that'd be awesome.
maybe we can visit the UK again sometime in the future. That'd be
I
great.
do plan on getting back over there as soon as I can, and actually Scotland's on the ticket this time because my mother's family, Scottish, of course, Campbells, Highland
Ah,
Campbells,
Campbell's.
Highland Campbells. My grandfather always was very, very clear, not Lowland Campbells. Big
Right.
difference, right? Because the Highlands supposedly fought against the British, and the Lowland Campbells kind of sided with the British,
Yeah,
with the
there's a
English.
whole sordid history of all of that, which
Yeah,
we can talk about some other time, perhaps.
yeah. Okay.
Good to have you, Dirk. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.